First of all, really, really nice to see everyone's names popping up there in the chat and see where you're all uh, beaming in from. I'm here in Nottingham. The sun is shining outside, and it's a really lovely evening. And it's lovely to see so many of you here. And in fact, really exciting to recognize so many of the names in the chat there. So many of you are names of writers and readers, people that I know through Erin, and you are a living illustration of what I'm just about to say about Erin's sense of community. Um, so she probably doesn't need very much introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce Erin all the same. The first time I met ireann Lorsung was at the Nottingham Writers Studio. I think it was 2008. It might have been earlier. At a social evening. And you might be wondering how social a social evening at a writer's studio can be, how good writers might be at making awkward small talk in a crowded social environment. I can tell you we are very good at making it awkward. But we were introduced, and Erin told me that she was working on a PhD at Nottingham University. And she told me it was a PhD about love, about honeybees, about the film Amelie, and about the deconstructionism of Derrida and Levinas. And I said, okay, I can tell that we are going to be friends. Obviously, I didn't say that, but I thought it, and I've thought it lots of times since. Erin was in Nottingham for several years, and during that time, she taught me that there is no writing without community, which is to say that writing is always for someone and to someone. We are writers and readers, readers of each other's writing and writers for each other's reading. She's built community wherever she's lived, in Nottingham, in Ghent and Flanders, in Maine, in Dublin, through her teaching, through her readings, through her wish to meet people and make things and eat cake and make things happen. And I've discovered lots of writers and lots of readers and other people within the writing community through Erin. And as I say, it's great to see so many of those names in the chat box right now. Those of you who know her will know that Erin doesn't only write poems. She writes essays, she writes novels, very good novels, and she writes newsletters and postcards and fragments. She edits journals and publishes books and designs posters. She makes clothes, she dyes clothes, she makes objects, she makes bread, she makes pickles, she makes cakes, she makes gardens, she makes spaces where people feel welcome. And I know that she doesn't really distinguish between those things. Her making is born from a curiosity about how things work and how things fit together and how we might nurture our creativity in a way that isn't disposable or destructive or squandering. It's also born from a wish to empower herself and the people around her. You want to make a book, you say. Look, here's how we can print, here's how we can bind, here's how we can use a letterpress or a screen print. Let's make a book together. It's a form of making which is attentive to the small and the material and the present, a form of making which often involves working with others. You did come here this evening to hear about Erin's poems, but I'm telling you this other stuff because it's all part of the story. Erin pays attention to the way things are made and to how she and you might also make them. And it's this quality of attention that finds its way into the making of the poems. It's a quote from a recent essay she wrote for Carcanet. I've taught myself to try to resist the sense that anything could be beneath my notice, no matter how small or ordinary or familiar. And from the same essay, I look at the weeds, the cracks in the pavement, the movement of birds, the people I pass, the buses and cars, the marks made on various surfaces, the water, the litter. And so, to quote finally, by way of actual introduction to Erin and to this pattern book, I'm going to read from my own blurb from the back of the book. Ireann Lorsung asks only that we pay close attention to the text, to the world, to the way the world becomes note by note the text, while she pays close attention alongside us. These are poems conducted at ground level, at walking pace, attentive to the changing of the light, of the seasons, of the certainties we thought we were growing up with. Here are poems about the American Midwest, the English Midlands, the low country of Flanders, about flax, field fairs, rivers, fathers and brothers, lovers, fabrics, sewing, grammar, bicycles, umbrellas, rain and snow, fading lights, damp houses, tea, gardens, glass jars, distance, language, breath, touch, and the strangeness of metaphor. Dear readers, listeners, friends, I place you in the capable hands of ireann Lorsung.
Hi, everyone. There's so many of you, and it's so nice to be here with you. I shouldn't go off script right away. So I just want to say I'm going to read a little thank you and introduction so that I don't forget anybody, and then I'll read some poems to you. Um, but most of all, I'm really, really glad that you're here. Yeah, thank you so much, Jon, for that introduction. That was I asked Jon not to read a list of accomplishments, which would make me feel really uncomfortable, and instead he read a list of accomplishments that make me feel very comfortable. So thank you, Jon. Um, okay. Hello, good evening, and good afternoon. Thank you all very much for being here in this imaginary room the size of the world. It's so beautiful in the chat to see everybody from the places that I've lived. Like, it's so moving to see you from all over here in this room together, the room of poetry. Before anything else, I want to thank Jon again for his introduction, and I want to thank Aisha for hosting tonight, and also to thank the really wonderful people at Carcanet, John McAuliffe and Michael Schmidt, who encouraged me to send some writing to them, and especially Jon for his delicate editorial touch, Andrew Latimer, who did the amazing book design, including the beautiful cover, Jasmine Linkletter, who has really gone above and beyond getting the book into people's hands and into places where it can be seen. Aisha Allenson, who is here tonight running the event, doing the kind of nerve-tingling work of making sure that Zoom works appropriately for everybody, and Alan Brannick, who has handled the distribution complexities of my transatlantic life. Thank you all for the work you've done to give my book a home. I want to thank Polly Atkin and Jon McGregor again for their careful readings of this book and for their words on its behalf. And I want to say that this book is for my friend Shayna. And some of the earliest poems in it were written in rooms with her, quite far away from where I sit now in Dublin. She is a great accompanist, one of many great accompanists in my life of poetry. This book is also for my mother, Leodán, Matt, my husband, my brothers and their families, Michael, Kristen, Cullen, Amy, Gus, Noah, and Randa, and for my two aunts, Nola and Grania, who were in the room with us when my father died. And it's written in memory of my dad, who, among other things, taught me to memorize poems, indeed bribed me to memorize poems. We got a quarter if we could remember a poem by heart. So here in the big room of poetry, I know my father also is. And I want to say too that I know that here in the big room of the poem are all of us in the world, all of us doing this necessary human thing, which is attending to meaning and making beauty and watching for the patterns that say meaning and beauty. And I know that we are not alone in this room. I know that while I sit in this quiet and comfortable place in Dublin, there are people not so far from here who are grievously afraid, who are dying in horrible ways, who are living the barest of lives under an ongoing occupation. If poetry is for anything, I want it to be for a world in which there is quiet and there are comfortable rooms and there are roses and the slow time of thinking for everyone. Rooms in which, in their quiet and their comfort, we can feel that our precious dead are with us and the precious living too. I'll begin with poems. So I'm going to read to you tonight, and thank you again for being here. And I'll begin with two poems by poets whose work has taught me over the last 30 years to make the poems that I make the way that I make them. And then I'll read a few poems from Pattern Book. I'll read the poems in the order they will occur, or they do occur. The book is real. I'll read them in the order they occur in the book so that maybe you can get a sense of the arc or movement of the book as a whole. Um, and also, you might be able to pick up some of the big ideas across the book: education and friendship and immigration and the everyday world. And then after that, I would love to talk with you in this kind of odd and um, only half present way. So please do feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. I would just love to have a conversation with you. Okay, I will stop reading now and I will read to you. Thank you so much for being here. To the young who want to die. Gwendolyn Brooks. Sit down. Inhale. Exhale. The gun will wait. The lake will wait. The tall gall in the small seductive vial will wait, will wait, will wait a week, will wait through April. You do not have to die this certain day. Death will abide, will pamper your postponement. I assure you, death will wait. Death has a lot of time. Death can attend to you tomorrow or next week. Death is just down the street, is most obliging neighbor, can meet you any moment. You need not die today. Stay here through pout or pain or peskiness. Stay here, see what the news is going to be tomorrow. Graves grow no green that you can use. Remember, green's your color. You are spring. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. Gerard Manley Hopkins. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim in roundy wells stones ring, like each tucked string tells each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name, each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more. The just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ, for Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his to the Father through the features of men's faces. Okay, these are mine, but they're yours now too. Postcard to Shayna with photo of Washington Avenue Bridge, Minneapolis. You said, do you ever look down and think he jumped from this high? We were young. We had poet fathers to lean on and real fathers. We could ask those questions because they were just poets, just fathers to us then. We crossed the Mississippi several thousand times those years, and every time I would look down at air and rocks and water, and there was the poet falling. January nights out late, snow blurring the spherical lamps, or pumping my bicycle's pedals as fast as they would go across that bridge in May, stolen peonies tied to the rack. We both did what we shouldn't, each in our own way. When you get this note, it will be the future. Under cheap polyfill comforters, our students will kiss with the ardor of those who know the world will never end. Friendship is a kind of time machine, it turns out. I remember your arrival from the place called Paradise and the smell of hot vinyl in your car. Not long ago. We sat 2 decades back in my red room to write the first things we would ever teach. We flew from that bridge after the poets we loved. But see, we live to tell. Simile. How does a simile work? Place something next to something and say, here. The here is where the somethings touch. The rainy night, like Debussy. There on the shelf, a piece of grapevine in a blue vase. The world is so much like itself, it can be hard to see. Tomorrow I will try again to understand. What is a simile? All night, all day, the rain comes in vertical lines, then horizontal lines, like a drawing made on the world I can perceive. How does a simile do whatever it is it does to us? The world is touching the world itself and touching me. My hand, this pencil making all these marks, a drawing of the world that is the world that I can make, that's making me. Sonnet for the second language speaker. And I know that some of my Belgium people are here. Hello. And this is really, I wrote this sonnet when I was kind of halfway through my time in Flanders. And at that point, I was fairly good uh, at speaking Dutch. But the trick is that if you're not perfect in speaking Dutch, Dutch people will speak their perfect English, or Flemish people, Dutch speaking people will speak their perfect English back to you. So this is my poem about learning to speak imperfect Dutch insistently. Sonnet for the second language speaker. What is a word? Depends on who you ask. For instance, in the rigid Flemish taal, so many things that feel like words don't pass, and my sprung language doesn't work at all. My sentences are yet another place where stringent rule embracers don't agree. To me, an error shows the second face of grammar. The mistakes are what I mean. The thing I value most in any line, drawn, made, wrote, thought, in fantasy or fact, is flexibility, that like a spine, the art supports the mind by which it's maked. What use is language flattened, dried in books? Our language lives most when it is mistook. Dit is ook voor mijn Belgen. This is also for the Belgians. The moon over Magritte's landscape. Maybe two notes. Magritte is a great Belgian surrealist. You probably know his painting of a man with an apple over his face, or This Is Not a Pipe. Maybe you know lots of his paintings, but if you don't, you might know those two. And then in this poem and another one, there's the word Leie. The Leie is a river in Flanders. The moon over Magritte's landscape. In the lowlands near the Leie, it is early evening, and the sky is the blue of sonnets and summer's days, but the moon is Belgian and is yours, painter, dangling by a thread from an astronaut's unimaginable finger way out beyond our reckoning. I'm here on Earth with you in the nacre of nightfall, where the pig farmer next door slides the barn open and the draft horse charges out into humidity, stirring up stars of dust with her hooves, her milk pail foal following her under the arch of roses that open all at once, like the mouths of children at the movies seeing the screen come alive for the first time. The hands of the clock wind forward exclusively. No one waits for us, not in the yellow stone hallway of the central station, not at the umbrella seller's shop. So we'll go together, out along the canal as always, on our bicycles, racing the draft horse the length of her paddock, racing the clock as it numbers minutes faster than we can count, summers on springs, winters on autumns, apples rolling from where they are piled in orchards as workers move among the pruned trees, taking those green apples that float in our dreams, that are carried in crates downriver toward the North Sea. Has evening left us? Has morning come already? We will walk right to the edge of it together. Hold my hand. Like this, I can reach into the tree of day and lift back to you two perfect fruits. The space station reduces to a speck. The migrating pickers gather in their red smocks, a line I like better than a border. In the distance, trains go back and forth, carrying their loads of movie stars and rocket fuel, national anthems, schools of painting, trade agreements. All together now, and waves go back and forth from England to here. Could we have seen the future from out in space? No? Well, I think we got what we came for anyway, Magritte. The lamp turns on next to the door. On Earth, it's evening now. The sky is light. The sky is light. Postcard to Shayna with drawing of blackbirds. Oh, and in case you don't know, maybe you do know, but in case you don't know, the poem that this poem is making reference to is 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, which was given to me when I was an undergraduate by a teacher that both Shayna and I ended up having. And it kind of blew my mind in that moment of being 21 or 20 and kind of never having read a poem in tiny bits before. And it completely changed what was possible. So it's 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird is the poem. Anyway, this poem is Postcard to Shayna with drawing of blackbirds. It took me this long to realize that when the poet said blackbirds, he meant blackbirds, pointing to the world. That's just an image in a poem, though. Outside, in our now of April rain, two blackbirds are pulling worms through the lawn's thatch. It's spring, and soon no one will have to resemble anyone except their younger self, who ran out of university buildings in rain like this, the fine rain of early spring, to steal daffodils from the sleeping grounds. Right back to me. My feet are soaking in the sodden grass. My hands are raw from cold and wet. The table's set. The light goes through green glass. A jar of bluebells. Rain glazes grapevine on the panes. Every warm thing from our girlhood calls us here. Blackbirds, poems, the world, its tablecloths and rainy mornings, cities, hands, and flowers, its universities, its sense of always coming to an end. Along the Lea, fields full of the memory. Along the Lea, fields full of the memory of flax, night turning July to August, a dark sky's small lights doubled in the river, under our sleeping windows where the hush of air is crossing lowlands from the ocean, the beautiful boy comes with his hair shining in the headlights like actual gold. Nothing but cliché can be spoken of the dead, who live in their distant cities without us, who are there whole, untouched, and singly crowned by death. The smallness of the body, surrounded by its corona of broken windshield. All that remains to say of them is a shrine words anyway cannot approach. So in their places we plant trees, lay narrow stones, leave candles flickering in jars, say novenas, make the sense of missing something up with bears and ribbons, roadside photographs, credible apparitions, letters, avoidance, small X's on a map. Of course, there is something missing, regardless of belief, and we know it. In the cool night air which bears the stars dispassionately, with no thought for our need or lack of language, the bodies of boys outline themselves in roadside grasses, where water will pool in late winter, where red and pink poppies will blow among cornflowers, wild roses, where the tiny pale blue star-shaped earthly blossoms of the flax will spell their names in all the languages beyond the ones we know. Okay. This poem is called Wake. It's the second last one. Thank you for staying with me. And I'll tell you that there's a Dickinson poem hidden in this poem. It's a very tiny Dickinson poem. It's 2 stanzas of 2 tiny lines. And it goes right down the side, so I've slightly adapted it to fit my needs. But the Dickinson poem goes, "In this short life that only lasts an hour, how much, how little is within our power." It's actually just 2 lines, sorry. So it's hiding there. Wake. In the room was his breathing, and we were, and this day of days was, the quality of lastingness hiding how short such long moments are. We waited. Our life continued endlessly all afternoon, as the breath that was the sound of his dying underwrote the house. Only breath, and us, and the October sun, and nothing lasts, despite eternity's illusion, despite how long a day, an hour feels, despite the ordinary reliability of breath, and hours, and days, and fathers, and Octobers, an end. How long we waited on the bed's chenille cover then, how much music we played for him on our phones, on the guitar, how we sang in those last hours, prayed, read poems, how little any bitterness mattered then, how the youngest lay his head on our father's translucent shoulder then, nothing within the circle broken. The day a golden blue October day, our bringing of water, our sponging of his mouth, our small powers, his breath that was, and was, and was, and then. Thank you again for being here. This is the end. An Ampler Zero. This poem is also quoting Dickinson, and it's a poem called, or well, they all have numbers, but it's a poem whose first line is, "More life went out when he went." More life went out when he went. An ampler zero. For some, an ampler zero. Scylla appear over snows diminishing. The upright, narrow leaves and blue turning white, turning purple buds of Scylla opening as the sun returns to its equinoctial habits. The nothing of the snow's going supplanted by the everything of here, the flowers say. The body will be reduced to ash. To reduce, she says, meant to bring back before it ever came to mean to diminish. She is holding the dictionary open, telling me she doesn't know enough yet to begin the thing she wants to write. What if you weren't waiting, as if sitting at the end of a long corridor, hearing the voices of the others faintly from behind a door and waiting your turn to be called in? I'm ready! But already, even as you sat there in the hallway's pale fluorescence, in the midst of something. Your life? The adventitious bulbs of Scylla spread, the seeds flung by dying flowers last spring germinate in the damp earth, which absorbs the last of the snow. Soon the apple trees will open pinkening arms, blossoms fill the branches so that spring resembles orchards full of snow. Oh, hang on, she says. It also means to bring to a different state, and later to a simpler or lower state. When she puts the dictionary down on the feather pillow, it sounds like nothing being set on top of nothing. What if, sitting in the winter hallway as strangers pass, and the sound of a drip somewhere in the pipes echoes and echoes. Your life were coming toward you. What if your life were not winter receding, but spring returning, an advancing tapestry of tiny blue flowers close to the earth, and caught on each the myriad baubles of the melting snow, among which flowers lying down you yourself might be brought back to a wider kind of nothing, in which nothing disappears but is transformed, the ampler zero of the infinitesimal movements of flowers against the melting of the snow, a waiting room where the dead are always with us. Springtime, the Milky Way, pearl-colored antechamber, waning and waxing garden, corona and corolla, alpha and omega, a forever of spring after the forever of winter, amplitude of ordinary breath, infinity of zeros. Thank you so much. Oh,
Hello.
that's so nice to see. Oh.
Sorry, I'm just going to sit for a moment and absorb. Um, I was enjoying, and I'm still enjoying seeing the comments in the chat box, and I think they're kind of the equivalent to people whooping and cheering at a sports event. They are kind of literary equivalent of that. I could hear the kind of the whoops of pleasure and recognition and kind of chiming moments where pe you were chiming with people, which is really exciting. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm only going to lower the tone now, but I have some questions for you, and I'm going to keep my questions quite short and specific in the hope that the Q&A box will shortly fill up with questions. We've had a few already, but while we're talking for the next 5 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes, hopefully this wonderful community of readers and writers will fill the Q&A box with substantial questions. So I've got some insubstantial questions for you. And these are all based on what I find really interesting about your work, and really rewarding about your work, which is the specificity and the tangibility of it, that it's all, for the most part, grounded in things and the things of the world and your experience of the world. And in your descriptions of the book, particularly in that wonderful video that you've made that I hope everyone has seen or will soon watch, and a couple of essays and interviews that I've read, you're quite specific about the themes of this book and the recurring images. So I'm gonna name some of those things that you've mentioned, and I'm gonna ask you to tell us about a favorite example of that thing. Not the favorite, because life's not a competition, but a favored example of a river.
The Leh, but also the Mississippi, it's tied. Am I
Okay.
allowed to have tied favorites?
Yeah,
No.
that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Do you
Not
want to give us a
someone
reason
that likes the rules.
in either case?
What was that?
Do you want to give us a reason for either of those?
Sure. I mean, so yeah, who can resist the Mississippi? It's such a massive river and it's so different all along itself. The headwaters of the Mississippi are very low. Um, where it goes out into the Gulf of Mexico, it's very wide and huge. Um, it has enormous bluffs and then also like very wide, shallow parts. Like it is a totally majestic river. Actually, this third favorite river, I just saw the Missouri River for the first time this winter, and I saw a section of the Missouri that has never been dredged or drained or canalized. And it was my first experience of like the sublime. I saw that and I thought, oh my God, like I understand settler colonialism as a totally bad thing in this kind of relatively abstract way. It's not always abstract, but that moment made me just like, oh, look, look what we did. Look what we did. Um, like look how beautiful and majestic and alive this being is, this river, like it really felt like a being. Um, so I have a kind of soft spot for the Mississippi. It is majestic, it is beautiful, it is various. It traverses an entire continent, and I grew up right near it. And I have a soft spot for the Leia, a very canalized part of the Leia. Do they say canalized? I'm just translating from Dutch actually in my head. Channeled version of the Leia, like a part that's been made into a canal. Anyway, I have a very soft spot for the Leia from living near it. But seeing the Missouri this winter was like a truly a mind-blowing experience. It was totally alive, and it was amazing to see a river that was totally alive.
Nice. Thank you. Um, this might tie in because whenever I picture you riding a bike, I picture you riding a bike next to a river, but a favorite bike ride.
Well, okay, that's very easy. I love the bike ride from where I lived in Flanders, along the Leie. So we lived right on the Leie. So along the Leie and then into the nearest small city, which was Deinze. It's a really short ride, it's about maybe 7 kilometers. Um, but oh, and Kim, you know that ride. Actually, there are probably several people here who know that ride really well, riding to Machelen and then riding to Deinze. That's a ride that's like in my bones. Yeah, you did that ride. Yeah. Yeah, I love that ride.
Okay.
Okay.
And a favorite painting?
Favorite painting. Well, I can't say the Mystic Lamb, right? I really love
Good.
um uh Matisse's paintings of the inside and outside of his house at the same time, the ones where you're seeing through the windows. Um, I love that you can imagine sitting at a at a table, like often a breakfast table or kind of ordinary table, looking out an ordinary window at ordinary things. And I love that he painted that view over and over. So it's not a specific painting, but I love his paintings of his window and whatever he was seeing through it. Matisse's. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Piece of music.
That's so much harder for me. I feel like music is one of those things that I don't. Okay, Mariah Carey's song "Always Be My Baby" will always make me very deliciously happy.
Okay. A weed.
A weed. I like hawkbit, which is a weed that kind of has dandelion-shaped flowers, but they grow like on Y-shaped stems coming from a main stem, and it has kind of a rosette of leaves at the bottom. Almost everyone here will probably have seen it. It grows all over the world. And I also like plantain, all the plantain family, which also kind of grow all over the world. Oh, and I like dock as well, John. Curly dock. Yeah. Or burdock. That's also good.
Okay.
Yeah, you know that one.
Nice. Okay. A word in a language that isn't English.
A word, Jagdpad, actually, which many people in the chat will also know. Jagdpad is means towpath, but it's also the name. It's spelled Jaagpaad. So for English speakers, it's a very unusual looking word. For Dutch speakers, it's a much more normal. Dat is een gewoon Nederlands woord, hè? But in English, it's not a gewoon Nederlandse word. It's a strange word. So I saw that word every day living in Flanders. Jaagpad, jaagpad, jaagpad. And so that's really a word that when you asked me if John sent me his questions before, and when he said favorite word in another
Give it
language,
away.
sorry, did I just blow it? Oh man. When he said favorite word in another language, I was like, oh my God, what kind of poetic word could I think of? Like, how can I? And then I realized, no, it's just going to be the word jaagpad. Towpath.
Okay. One more. Table.
A favorite table. Okay. It is a table with a kind of light wood top. It has two leaves that you can bring out and in on the sides. It has, well, in my childhood, it has kind of gray blue legs, and now it has green, dark green legs and kind of underframe. And it is the kitchen table in my parents' kitchen. I am sitting here, and my brother Cullen is sitting here, and my brother. No, Cullen is sitting here, and I'm sitting here, and Noah's sitting here, and Michael's sitting there. That's so that we won't fight. I have to remember who fights with whom so I can figure out where to put us. And then my dad is sitting there, and my mom is sitting here. Um, and we did our homework at that table and we ate all our meals at that table. And we just sat around at that table and we had all our birthdays at that table and every holiday at that table, except for the big holidays. Those were on the floor of the living room with everybody else. Yeah, thank you for those really fun questions, John.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to read you some more substantial questions.
Okay.
Um, okay, Bill Curry asks, to what do you attribute the delight you find in life?
Hmm. Life, friends, is delightful. We must say so. That's a really bad bastardization of another Berryman poem. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. The great sky flashes, the sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. I mean, life is totally delightful. I mean, life is horrible as well. Uh, and it's totally delightful. It's delightful because it's horrible. Well, actually, the philosopher Edmund Burke, my partner will correct me if I have this wrong, um, said delight was the cessation of pain. And so I think, yeah, that's why it is delightful because there is so much horror and there are so many awful things all the time. And at the same time, not in an or way, but in an and way, there are the facts of all of the amazing living things around us, continually, from, other humans right down to the hawkbit and the dead nettle and whatever else just there. Um, the fact is that it is a precious and beautiful and delight providing world. Thanks for the question, Bill.
Yeah, nice. Um, Chloe wants to know the question I was just about to ask you, why you can't talk about the Mystic Lamb. Why would that not be? Can you tell us about the Mystic Lamb?
Yeah, so I only said not the Mystic Lamb because there are a number of poems in this book that are kind of drawing on this very large triptych, or kind of polyptych altarpiece, called Het Lamgods, or The Adoration of the Mystic Lamb is the name in English, or sometimes people call it the Ghent altarpiece. And there's an amazing Wikipedia article on it actually, which has great images of the panels. It lives in St. Baf's Cathedral in Ghent. So it lived near me for a while. Um, and it's very odd. It was painted by the Van Eyck brothers, or Van Eyck brothers. Um, it is their masterwork. It the central panel depicts an altar on which there is a white lamb standing, its body kind of rended by these rays, and all around it are arrayed rows and rows of important people having a good worship. And in the background, you've got some magical towers and other things that people like to paint in the 16th century. Is that right? Is it 16th? I think it's actually 15th century. Um, and then you also have on the inside and the outside of the panels, you have the major stories from the Bible. Mary getting told she's gonna have a baby by God, and what else? Some judges, Adam and Eve. But what I really love about it is that all the way through it, you can tell that the Van Eycks were looking at the world. Uh, there's this towel rack in Mary's room that looks just like a towel rack. It looks just like a towel rack. You've seen the towel rack in somebody else's house. And it has a towel hanging on it that looks just like a towel. And all over the ground where all these, fancy worshipers are having their moment of important worship, there are these plants that you can recognize because you've pulled them out of your yard. Um, Dandelions and what else is there? There pansies and all kinds of weeds that you would know the names of still and you would be able to recognize. And so I just love that it's this massive, important religious painting, that also has like bored angels and also has tiny little flowers that they took a lot of care to paint, and also has a towel that looks like one that's probably hanging in your bathroom right now. Thank you so much for the question, Chloe.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. I understand why that is one of your favorites. Okay, Shana, is it Shana or Shayna? Sorry,
Shayna.
Shayna.
Oh,
So
wow.
Shayna has gone on a parenting errand, but she wanted to remind you that you like Ben Folds 5.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah, thank you
that's
for that like horrifying blast from the past. That's true. When I wrote a lot of the early poems, when I lived very near Shayna for the last time, or for the first time, I did like Ben Folds 5.
interesting use of the past tense. Alan wants to know when you began to see the pattern in this book, the flowers and everyday miracles and echoes that weave the poems together.
Yeah. Um, well, really, Ellen, that's a great question. When did I start to see it? I mean, first of all, I kind of work um from a pattern place anyway. Like form is almost always first for me. I feel like I don't know how to have ideas, but I do know how to repeat myself. And so I generally start everything by just trying to identify something that could be repeated and then seeing where that goes. So that's always in play for me. But um it was really when I sat down in this kind of slightly dank room in Kortrijk last summer. I had a short residency through the city library and the textile archive there. And I sat down and kind of started assembling all of these poems, many of which were very old. You know, some of the earliest poems in this book are from 2007, kind of span the whole time, well, long, lot of years. Um, and I realized that everything that the thing that united all of them was this sense of things repeating in a kind of on and off pattern. There were the sonnets that do sonnety things, which are all on and off patterns, the sonnets themselves that kind of break down in an unbroken, broken pattern. There was the movement of seasons, which is a kind of pattern. There is the sewing, which is a pattern. There's drawing, which is mark slash pattern making. So it was really as I kind of put them together in my despair, feeling like they didn't go together, that I started to realize that pattern was in fact the thing that I could bring out that would say, oh, actually, they do go together. And that was what taught me also to look at family life, education, um, death and birth as also like part of that pattern. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you. I can see the clock ticking, but I'm going to squeeze in one or two more. Trudy, quite early on in proceedings, asked um, about the body. She says, so many of your poems situate the body so viscerally in the world and in the seasons of the world, touching on the embodiment of grief, connection, love, place. What was it like to write and to alchemize language in this way from your own body?
Mm. Thank you for the question, Trudy. It's nice to see you. Well, not you know what I mean. Um, I don't know that I've ever thought about it that way. I don't I don't know where language would come from if not my body. So I guess what I'm saying in response to your really nice question is that it feels very correct to me that language comes from one's body, and my language comes from this instrument. Um, I was taught by poets who taught me that poetry was made to be sung, to be done with our instruments. And also I was raised in a family where we were listening to music. My dad made music. Um, my mom sang. My like there was just singing around, there was music around. So the idea that language just is something in your body was really like feels really at home to me. Um, and also, I mean, I was a kid with big feelings, and I think I'm probably an adult with fairly big feelings. And so it also feels very natural to me that all of the experience of the world comes sensorially and is experienced in here, and then language, which is also in here, can take it out there, maybe to you. Um, yeah, there's no way to be in the world without this instrument, the, total perception, observation instrument. Um, and so the poems have to come from that. It feels very natural to me. But yeah, I feel like I can't answer your question very well, but I am trying. Thank you for it.
Thank you. I wonder if, and I'm just putting words in to Trudy's math now, but I wonder if part of what she's responding to is the way so many of your poems feel like you're holding on to the world, like you're walking in the world, your feet are on the ground, you're touching the surfaces, and there's something very embodied about the way you're looking and writing.
Yeah, that makes
Um, but that's me. That's not Trudy. I don't know. Okay, I will. I've got one more, and I think I've missed some out because there's questions in the chat and questions in the Q&A. But I'll finish with a question from Sarah, who says a textile pattern book is a guide or example for readers to replicate or imitate. How might your readers follow your patterns?
Oh God. Sarah Moss has given me um a Viva in the chat. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so a pattern book for those of you who don't know, there are kind of two kinds. One was a book that was made with kind of sample objects in it so that girls and women could learn to sew or embroider or do other textile arts. So you would open the book and there might be a small version of a child's garment, a baptismal gown, or a small piece of needlework that you would learn to copy by looking at it. Um, and then the other kind was a book of fabric samples, textile samples, so woven or dyed or printed fabrics, small pieces that would be arranged on the leaves of the book so that purchasers could choose their fabrics. And I think both of these, how my readers follow my patterns, Jesus, I don't know. But maybe the thing is that kind of going back to what you said at the very start, John, everything about the world teaches us how to be in the world, or teaches us what is another thing that is possible in this world, and opens up a door that's marked, ask a question about this. And so just like for me, looking at textile pattern books has taught me how to make things. I learned to make garments by looking at garments. Um, if you want to make a poem, if you need healing, just go to the doctor. I mean, that familiar spine, and open it. A lion waits, a bobolink, the speckled streets and dooryards. But this isn't information. Whoa, that's a quotation of my own work. Um, all you have to do if you want to make a poem is go to poems in the world, right? Everything that human beings make can be made by all of us. We can spend our time looking really, really carefully. I spend my time looking really, really carefully at the very smallest things, how the comma works, where the weeds like to grow. What did I do with my body in that social situation that made other people feel weird or made them feel good? We can all do that. We can spend our time that way. Um, if you want to follow my pattern, just look at the world and follow your own.